Hello. So today we have a wonderful guest who fulfills all of our criteria for being an extremely successful female in cardiology, as well as having a family. She's the perfect person for this series. And our next guest here is Dr. or Professor Karen Sliwa, who is the director of the Cape Heart Institute. She's led and still leads several inter-Africa and global research projects, and she was the first female president of the World Heart Federation, as well as being the first representative from Africa to hold this post, although I believe you started off somewhere in Europe. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. I'm German, but I grew up already outside of Germany. But I studied medicine in Berlin. And when I finished studying, I relatively soon went to South Africa, where I did my specialization as an internal medicine physician and then as a cardiologist. Yes.
And were there ever times or even people who tried to put you off doing this?
Yeah, yeah, clearly. Oh, look, and there were my mother and my mother-in-law who had the impression that might be really a bit much specializing and having children and doing a PhD at the same time. So it is quite a lot to be a cardiology fellow, doing a PhD and having two young children, I must admit. So I do understand their concerns, but somehow it did work. But a very important component, and I really have to highlight that I found the right husband. I mean, my husband is Uli. He is a orthopedic surgeon, a spine surgeon, and it's really not so much how I coped. The question is also how he coped, because we really shared spending time with the kids, picking them up from school. He did always the homework with the children. He gets a lot of the credit, I must say.
Wonderful, but you also managed to persuade him to do this. So this is not particularly in the culture of a lot of our viewers. So
Mm.
how exactly did you get your husband to take a more equal share of the load?
I think I'm lucky. I mean, my husband's also German. His mother was already working as a teacher. She always worked. And I'm still happily married. So we had our fights like everyone else who is long-term married, I guess, but we never had an issue about who has to do what with the children. And look, he loves kids, so that makes it easier. And he simply is a very passionate and good father.
Well,
And that obviously makes it easier, made it much easier for me. It was really never a topic where we had a conflict.
so what stage of your career were you at when you actually had the babies?
Quite early. I was 28 when I had my first daughter. So I was a junior doctor. And with the second daughter, she born 4 years later, I was a trainee in cardiology. So what most people would consider a very inconvenient time,
Mhm.
because you are very busy with working and your career.
And did you get
Um,
maternity leave to cover some of that time?
Yeah, in South Africa, I mean, it's compulsory to get maternity leave for 3 months. And I must say, I was very fortunate in the way that my first daughter was still born in Germany. And in there, you actually have, if you're still in training, so I was actually an internship at that point. You get a day mother who supports you. It's a German law that when you are having a child while you're in training, you get a day mother who helps you. So that was obviously fantastic, because I kept on breastfeeding until Lina was 6 months. So I had to interrupt my work at the Tropical Disease Institute taking the bus, breastfeeding the child, driving back. I must admit, my employer at that time at the Tropical Disease Institute found it really a challenge to have a young doctor who insisted on breastfeeding and taking her lunch break to travel with the bus to see the baby. But I guess I'm quite resilient. I mean, look, this is long ago, 92. Breastfeeding was not a big topic, definitely not for male head of departments. But I just kept going. And then in South Africa, a maternity leave is also, you get 3 months. And I was lucky in a sense that I had a very nice head of medicine. And when I returned to work, I could do my specialist training in nephrology, where it's not a lot of night calls, and usually we are finished around 3. Dialysis is very automated to some extent. So it was, he placed me somewhere where I had a little bit of a more quiet slot. So I did had support by that head of department to somehow survive, yeah, being a registrar in medicine and having a new baby.
Okay, so it's possible. This is the wonderful news. It is possible.
Yes, yes.
So,
Perhaps I want to add something. One should ask for sex. I always did ask for sex. I made an appointment and said, look, I know it's a challenge what I'm doing. Is there not an option that it can be a bit accommodated until the baby is a bit bigger? Or I told him I'm happy to do whatever, all the lectures and teaching like everyone else, but it's not very practical to give me last minute task. If you wouldn't mind telling me a little bit earlier so I can prepare a little bit better. Because if you have children and you're working, I mean, you're not very good if someone tells you, please give the Friday lecture and it's Thursday. So,
right.
so I did ask if they could accommodate me. And sometimes I got a bit puzzled look, but usually it happened.
Yeah, well, and clearly it didn't impede your success. So that's also
Hmm.
wonderful news. So, and over the years, do you think things like that have gotten better now that there are perhaps more women in medicine and in cardiology? Do you think that it's become easier to ask for a little bit of accommodation?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think when I speak to younger women, I think in some countries and some hospital, it's a bit easier, and in some it's not. I mean, I know from many of my junior colleagues when they say they want to do cardiologists, they still get questions. Oh, do you think it's possible to combine it with the family? And some health departments really try to put young women off. So
So what do you tell them?
I think it's possible. I mean, I really don't see any reason why it shouldn't be possible. And you're not, look, cardiology, you have many different fields. You're not always, look, you obviously can't be in the cath lab while you're pregnant from the radiation risk. But I mean, afterwards you can, and you're not pregnant forever. And so I really don't see a reason why there's anything you shouldn't do only because you plan to have whatever, 1, 2, or 3 children.
Mhm.
And if people tell you it's complicated because you might not be around for 3 months because you're maternity leave, it's simply bad planning from the head of department. Nowadays, half of the medical, of young doctors or graduates are female, and females still get the babies. So you better make a plan that, look, we plan if people go on holiday. I mean, we all know 4 months vacation, and in our leave system, leave roster, we do know that people go on holiday and the service is not breaking down. So I think you can actually develop a program and see you have 12 fellows and 4 are females and they're between 30 and 40, and statistically 2 or 3 will most likely have a child in the next year. So you actually can develop a formula where you accommodate that some people might choose to have a child. I think that's not an excuse.
What do you feel about the idea of there being more paternity leave?
I think so. I think it doesn't really matter who stays at home. I mean, I think breastfeeding is important, but I mean, you can pump breast milk off and it can be given to the baby when the mother's back at work. And I think it's absolutely fine if the father stays at home for 6 months or 3 months or however long that is.
Mhm.
But for me, anyhow, I must say it was never a particular issue when the kids were very small, but I think children need parents, in particular when they're teenagers. So the whole concept that you have to bond with your baby, I personally think is a bit overrated. I really think it's very important to have time for your children when they are in a critical phase. And this is, in my view, actually when they're teenagers, they're very vulnerable to all sorts of issues. And I think one needs to make time when the children are older.
And to reassure people again, so your children who were teenagers when you were a cardiologist, how have they turned out?
Pardon?
How have they turned out?
Oh,
Your
no, 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 no. I mean, they were normal teenagers. They had their challenges, they had difficult times. I had difficult times with them. They had difficult times with me.
and now
And but now they're very, very nice, very nice daughters and lovely young ladies. And they're both doctors, so they obviously were not put off by their parents. They
Mhm.
decided to do the same. So it can't be that they had a very traumatizing experience with us working quite a lot, I must say, because they both chose to study medicine and they're both working in Cape Town. So yeah, I don't think we had a negative impact with our lifestyle on their choice of life.
Wonderful. So let's get back to you and your tips for success. When you were going into cardiology or just
Mhm.
medicine early on, did you always know what you wanted to be? Did you always have a vision of kind of where you would go and how you would do it? Or did it just come to you step?
Yeah, no, no, no. My career was rather chaotic. I mean, I first wanted to be a specialist GP. That's why I did a year of surgery, obstetrics, diploma tropical medicine. Then I realized I actually really like surgery, but I'm not that brilliant with my hands. So I thought I don't think I would be a very good surgeon. And then I decided to specialize in internal medicine. Then my weakest subject was cardiology, and I thought I will never ever pass the exam if I don't spend a year in cardiology. So I spent my last year in my medicine training in cardiology, and then I started my PhD, and I thought it's actually not a bad topic. And then I specialized in cardiology. So nothing was planned. I just grabbed the opportunities.
Mhm. And how about your involvement in, politics and societies and things that have led you to be successful in, for example, the World Health Federation?
Yes. Yeah, I started quite early with being engaged in something. So we have in South Africa, we have the South African Heart Association. It's our cardiac society. So even as a fellow, I uh, was part of the conference planning program. I founded heart failure working group. Um, I like working in teams. So for me, it came quite naturally to be engaged at university committees, at registrar committees. I guess it started at school. I was already whatever class group leader, whatever, representing something. I think some people like to have an impact, and others prefer not.
Mhm.
So it probably started at school and then at university and later then obviously in cardiology. And then I was quite involved in the European, I'm still very involved, European Cardiac Society and then the World Heart Federation. So it's a process.
And you also, I think, had some interesting opportunities when you were in South Africa when apartheid was ended. Can you talk about that?
Yes, I mean, it was, I worked for 18 years in a hospital which is in Soweto, Baragwana Hospital, and that was formerly the former hospital for Black South Africans. And I came to South Africa when there was just political transition. And it's also obviously a process which takes a lot of time, how you change a very unjust system to hopefully becoming a more just system, which involved a really engagement with all sorts of stakeholders, with colleagues. There was obviously still bitterness from a side of the colleagues who were poorly treated, adjustment that needed to be done, and really changing of the character of the people who were advantaged. And that is a process which to some extent is still ongoing, because in apartheid, the children and students were obviously disadvantaged. So it's a long-lasting legacy. But um, from our own perspective, or the perspective why we have now actually quite a lot of women in leadership position in South Africa, it has something to do with aspects of apartheid, because it really required a restructuring of the society, and in many committees and many roles, because of the restructuring, women also had a better opportunity, like compared to other countries, to get into leadership position or have a say. So I think this whole political injustice and changes advantage women altogether.
Yeah, and I think were involved also in the kind of the restructuring that led to, determination that committees should be made up of a certain number of ethnic groups, but also
Yes,
of women,
also women. Yes,
which leads to more opportunities for women in general, and
yes,
even an expectation, and
yes.
the important thing, a cultural expectation that women will
Yes.
move into these roles, whereas in a lot of other countries, there's a cultural expectation that they won't. So,
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
was it helpful being from outside of that system? The fact that you had started in
Yeah.
Germany and came in without all the kind of the preconditioning that the
Yes.
local people had.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, as a German, I have my own history, as you know, the Nazi regime and Third Reich. So
Mhm.
it's not that I don't have my own historical baggage, which you simply get if you come from a certain country. But I didn't have the apartheid baggage, because I was not here at that time. And I think that clearly was helpful in sometimes leading discussions or addressing expectations from different sides. Yes.
Yeah, it's often very important, I think, even in your own culture, to when somebody's saying something, to
Mm,
question whether this is true or whether this is just part of
mm,
historical preconceptions that aren't actually correct.
yes.
So,
Yeah.
excellent to either to be from outside or to kind of
Mm,
step outside of the box.
mm.
What do you think was your most, well, several important attributes that you have that allowed you to kind of push forward when opportunities arose, for example, to go for them?
Yeah. It's difficult. One usually doesn't analyze oneself so much, but I think I have a big natural curiosity. So I think that is important. I like to really like new things from scratch. And I know it sounds very contradictory to what other people say. I often, if I start something new, I don't read too much what other people have done.
Mhm.
I really sit down, usually a walk or a swim, and I think, how would I approach it? and I really start from scratch how I think it would make sense to approach something. And many people do differently. They spend a lot of time researching what others have done.
Mm.
Let's say you start a new presidency, or you want to form a new working group on heart disease and pregnancy. So most people research the literature. What have others done? What have others thought? And I usually don't do that, just the opposite. I try not to be influenced by my predecessors, but
I
make a
think that's
plan.
perfect. I think that's absolutely wonderful because the world is so different. I mean, with technology
Yes.
and the internet communications and
Mhm.
AI coming in, people need to expect things to work differently. And this ability to just step into something that you're not really sure what it's going to be like, and you
Yes.
just go for it and do the best you can,
Yes.
while being, as you say, sensible. How should this work if we really
Yes.
wanted it?
And yeah, and then what I do, I then, when I applied my mind, how, let's say, forming a new institute or taking over an institute, then I do consult and speak to people. And then I'm not scared to really implement big changes. And obviously, big changes will make some people unhappy. It's in the nature of humans. And I try really to be respectful and polite, and I think I am. But I mean, I'm also not very worried that I'm not liked for some time. I think that's probably one of my important attributes, that I can live with being disliked.
Mhm.
I'm quite okay with that. And I think as a leader, you need to get there. You cannot do changes and having really a wish to lead and change something and always wanting to be always loved. I
Mhm.
want to be loved by my family, my friends, but not necessarily by all my colleagues.
Well, as they say, even Jesus couldn't please everyone.
Oh, you can't. You can't, definitely not. No. And
Oh,
I think that's a mistake, unfortunately, which I see often in women,
mhm.
more than in men. I mean, I think for most men, it's quite naturally. They don't care so much if somebody's thought like them. And for women, I think is something I see quite commonly, that they struggle with this concept.
Okay. If you were able to talk to a younger you,
Mm.
coming into cardiology now, so say someone in an early career thinking about being a cardiologist, what advice would you give them?
Um, yeah, I think my advice is really not to even consider not doing something you really want to do. So you just start. And if you face challenges, you address them. You don't wait that they build up. You try to resolve them with the person who confront you in a quiet manner. If that is not helpful, and I had that you be confronted with aggression or people don't talk to you anymore. I had one head of department not talking to me for a year. Then I suggest what I did was very helpful. I did conflict resolution courses. Too late. I would recommend doing it early, because there are ways how you can avoid conflict and you still succeed. I mean, there are mechanisms. And then you need to go higher up. I mean, if your head of department is blocking you, like for instance, for me, not giving you access for training in the cath lab, and I know of other people who had exactly the same, you need to be skilled how you discuss, complain to the higher level. You should not accept it. And there is ways how you can train doing that in an appropriate manner. And I strongly recommend to get this training and keep going. I would not give up. I never gave up, but I think I did my conflict resolution courses. They didn't exist at that time, but nowadays they do exist. So I very much recommend, if you really want to go for something and you fight resistance, you better get the skills to deal with that. And that will be helpful.
Yeah, very good advice. Okay, thank you.
Mm.
So any last words that you would like to leave on how to become successful in cardiology or in life, either?
Yes, yeah, I think it's very important to really think about carefully what you want. I mean, not everyone wants to put the neck out and be successful. What the label successful. You can be very successful in many different aspects of life, and I think one shouldn't get trapped, by the standard criteria of success. I think that's step number one. You need to really think, what do I want? What is for me success? A successful life. And there are many, many different options. Then, if you made up your mind what you really want to do, you must go for it. And if you need support and skills and learning languages or leadership courses, whatever, then you need to acquire it and you move on.
Very good advice.
And good luck. I wish everyone good luck.
Yes, me too. Thank you very much, Dr. Sliwa. That was wonderful.